On behalf of the Professional Baseball Strength and Conditioning Coaches Society, I'd like to welcome you to the PBSCCS Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Messina.
All right, everybody, I'm here with Ben Loftis. Ben, thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate your time. Tell the listeners about yourself, if you would, please.
Yeah, Chris, thanks for having me. So I'm a baseball, primarily strength and conditioning coach, currently live in Northwest Arkansas. I've spent, this is probably my 12th year in strength and conditioning total. I spent 4 years with the San Diego Padres system from 2018 through 2021. So yeah, live in Northwest Arkansas now. My wife and I run our own training facility called Resolute Performance. And we are just starting, we're wrapping up year 3, starting year 4 in May.
So we're going to get into a lot here, the old days in baseball, the new days, running your business, also running it with your wife, which probably adds another layer to things. But kind of talk to me about maybe the journey from baseball to the business side. And we're going to get into this a little bit more later, but just kind of briefly, like, what was the spark plug for you to be like, I want to leave baseball, I want to start my business? And then was your wife part of that in the picture? Like, I would assume she has a background in either athletic training, strength and conditioning, sport performance, something along the way that you guys kind of came together and you're like, yes, this is what we want to do.
Yeah. So, my wife is actually, she's a CSCS strength coach as well. Her background has been in men's and women's basketball and tennis primarily. She was actually a college gymnast, and then also did pole vault. So a lot of background that I don't have in a lot of good ways. So I've always kind of been like a Happy Gilmore in some capacity of like Happy always said that he's not a golfer, he's a hockey player. And I started actually in football and thought that was going to be kind of my journey, but then ended up in baseball. And then kind of the same thing in the business world. I never thought that I would be a business person. But here I am. So ultimately 2021 was the first minor league season after COVID. And it was a very interesting season for a lot of ways for a lot of people, just kind of going through the protocols and expectations about how things are going to be carried out. And at that point, my wife and I had been dating for a while, and probably about just after the All-Star break, I knew like, hey, we're probably going to get married. And 180 days a year in a hotel is probably not the best way to start marriage. And a lot of people do it. But ultimately I just didn't think that was the best option for us. So I actually had a conversation with a gentleman in Northwest Arkansas that was a member at the church that we attend. And he had this vision for opening up a training facility and had some other connections. And that was kind of like what planted the thought of like, hey, maybe you could do this. So like him and this other gentleman would kind of be like the backers of the business and kind of help get it off the ground, but I would be the primarily like coach running it day to day. And yeah, ultimately the way the 2021 season unfolded, COVID was what it was. There's a lot of people that I think kind of hit some decision points on the road of terms like what's next. And it just seemed like it was time to be done. It wasn't like a for sure, I definitely want to be out, but it was definitely like, hey, we need to look at some other options and consider with kind of everything on the table. So yeah, that's kind of how the ball got started there. And obviously there's a lot of conversations and we can get more into this a little bit later, but yeah, it was kind of like the blend of a lot of right circumstances coming together that kind of like ultimately pushed me out. But how it came together was a lot different than what we expected in a good way. So, yeah.
All right. Well, before we get into that, let's kind of throw it back to the baseball days. I always like to kick these off with this one. What is your best professional baseball story that you have? Either something that makes you laugh, something you're proud of, something you look back on that you're just really fond of. Just what sticks out the most in your mind?
Yeah. So that's a tough one. a lot of very rambunctious clubhouse moments. But I would say that I had one athlete who he was a pitcher, Venezuelan. Was always just kind of like a goon, a character, and I had him on my roster. I think my second year, third year, and fourth year. All 3 years, and he was always just this big jokester, and he kind of like endeared himself to me a little bit. So his name was Carlos, but he joked that his name was Chuck Loftis, and he was my son from Nebraska. And he kind of like built out this whole like alter ego that he would whenever like the day after he started in the game, he'd go out and have to be the ball boy for the umpires, and every time he went out there and gave him a drink, he would like tell them something about himself and try to like Americanize himself as much as possible. So there was one game in particular that he every time he went out there, they asked him like another like really important question, like, did you play college baseball? He's like, yeah, I played college baseball. They're like, well, where'd you play at? And then he like run back to me. He's like, well, college in Nebraska. They're like, University of Nebraska, Omaha. He'd go back out there and like he like had this whole thing. He memorized it. It was really funny. And we would also, whenever somebody got called up to our level, the first day we would make a scene in the clubhouse, and we'd have like a fake argument just to make the new person really uncomfortable. And yeah, it was really entertaining just to watch them like, oh my gosh, this is super awkward. And we'd like get closer and closer to their locker just to see how they would react. And then at the end, we'd like laugh and hug. And it was, so yeah, I still can't stay in contact with him. He's not pitching anymore, but yeah, we had a lot of pranks and whatnot that we pulled over those 3 years. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, the minor leagues is always good for obviously there's development and there's seriousness, but there's a lot of joking, there's a lot of pranks, there's a lot of on-field in between innings things that go on during the game. It's much more like this wholesome entertainment value blended in with development versus like when you get to the big leagues, it's like, all right, everybody is serious all the time. We must win tonight. And then there's occasional jokesters, but yeah, I look back very fondly at some of the, as you said, the rambunctious clubhouse moments and characters that really shape you when you're in the minor leagues, because you're all in it together, right? You don't know any better. You're trying to get them to do something, and then they're like the least bit serious, and then the one time they're serious, you joke with them, and they're like, oh, this guy is a human, like he's not just a robot. So the back and forth of the minor leagues is something I definitely miss, and I definitely look back on fondly from my time for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely a situation where it's Groundhog Day every day, and if there's not some sort of entertainment to lighten the mood, the monotony will definitely kind of eat you alive. So yeah, it's good to be able to have those opportunities to share a laugh, and also like that helps you just learn more about other people, seeing the humanity of it's not just about names on a roster moving up and down. And I think especially when the players can experience that from you and experience that with one another, it just it makes it a lot more enjoyable.
Yeah, and even, I mean, you mentioned it briefly, but you keep in touch with him and he doesn't pitch anymore. The reality is most of those guys in the minor leagues are not going to make it to the big leagues, that is, right? Obviously, they're all still professionals, but so for you, when you're in the minor leagues, you have to give them a really good experience that they're going to remember forever. And a lot of those guys look back on that time very fondly, and then they have to go into the real world and they have to do something. And it's like, man, you remember when we were in high A and we were in the middle of nowhere and we did this or we did that. And, sometimes you don't even remember, like, nope, I don't remember, but dude, I'm glad you remember, because, I made a lasting impact on your life. And, you look back on it, very fondly. And I guess that means we did something right. Right. But I think the minor leagues is much more interesting, much more different. And probably personality wise, from a strength coach, you have to take it serious, right? Because you're trying to move up as well, but also you have to have that fun and playful side to, kind of keep it light. Because like for me, I started in Bristol, Tennessee, and, no offense to Bristol, Tennessee, there's just not a lot going on there. So yeah, we could all be miserable together in the middle of nowhere, Tennessee, or we could make the most of it. And, thankfully for me, I had a bunch of good staff members around me that had kind of been in the minor leagues before. They could help guide me and kind of support me. Like, hey, you don't have to take this so serious. Like, let's have fun here. Let's, I don't know, play ultimate frisbee one day or something. And we just made the most out of the situation we were in. And I feel like that's kind of very similar with a lot of people in the minor leagues, just given the cities and things like that you play in. They're not the glamorous Bostons and New Yorks and California cities of the world. You're much more into like different corners of America that, to me, like, you may never see unless you're in the minor leagues, which was another
Oh,
kind of fun
yeah,
aspect of it.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. My last year of pro ball, I did my best fishing in Michigan because I was in the Great Lakes region for the whole summer. And there's a lot of like podunk little ponds and creeks I never would have found in Michigan had I not, been playing in Midland or Saginaw or, some of those other places. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a very different experience, and I've said it a million times, but if you're a coach listening and you get a chance to be in the minor leagues, you should really take it. There's a lot of difficult days, but there are a lot of like really good hidden values in minor league baseball that you're just not going to get anywhere else in this field. And if you can have the opportunity to do it, at least for me, I think you should definitely do it.
Definitely.
So what do you believe in within strength and conditioning that others think you are crazy for believing?
Yeah. So I was actually asking some of our athletes this today, and one of the things that they say that we talk about a lot is how we view competition. And this kind of transcends strength and conditioning to all just athletics in general, but I'll get a little bit more specific with it. The Greek word of competition means to strive with or to strive alongside. And a lot of times I think we in Western culture will turn it into it's me against you, striving against another person. So if you really think about what that word means, it means that it's me with you, in that like I need your best and you need my best so we can make each other better. And when we train that way, it makes it really easy to be excited for everybody else's process. And so the flip side of that, we talk a lot about how we want to compete, we don't want to compare. And comparison ruins development. If you're constantly comparing yourself to another person, I mean, especially like minor leagues, it was a great example of this because you would have, you'd have 16-year-old Latins that get called up to the US to play in the AZL or ACL and the GCL. And they're at a completely different step than a guy who's played 4 years of college baseball in terms of their physical development and then what they're able to do on the field. So comparison ruins development. And how that kind of plays itself out now with what we're doing as a business, because a lot of what we do is with youth and high school athletes. We have college athletes, we have pro athletes, but majority of the kids that we see around are middle school, high school. One of the things that I didn't expect getting into the private sector is we do work with a lot more female athletes than I have in the past. And that's been a great thing. It's helped me learn a lot. And one of the things that we do, my wife and I actually experimented this when we were dating. She was doing Olympic weightlifting, and we began to periodize her training around her cycle. And that was a game changer for her in terms of her ability to continually train, make progress, and maximize where she's at. So once again, like if a female athlete's at a different spot in her cycle than another female athlete, like what they're capable of at that time of the month is going to be completely different. And that's not fair to them. I think sometimes we can get really stuck into like what's on the paper, and we kind of struggle to look at what's going on within the person from a physiological standpoint, and then also like mental, emotional as well. So if you have the mindset of competing with people, you can be a lot more positive in what you're trying to accomplish. But if you're, constantly saying, this is how things need to be, it becomes a lot easier to compare. So, that's kind of one thing within the comparison factor. Another issue that I see within the comparison ruining development is that, people will think that there are specific programs or exercises that are specific to different sport demands. This is a baseball workout. This is a football workout. And there are like, common themes based off of demand of the sport that we do need to account for. But I think within that, sometimes people forget about the individual. They start, well, this baseball player does this, you should do this as well. Well, this baseball player has a long torso and short femurs. This baseball player has no torso and short or long femurs. Their program's not going to look the same. So I think the individuality is also something that helps kids compete well within training. And then probably most importantly within comparison, and I think Chris, you can speak to this a lot too. I don't say this to sound off color or I'm anti anything, but I do think that we are kind of in a place in strength conditioning where I think strength is starting to become a little bit overrated. I think that being strong matters, but not at the cost of accessible range of motion and hampering your overall athleticism and speed. So I think that, we do need to get kids stronger. And yes, if you can put more force in the ground, you're going to run faster. You're going to be able to hit the ball harder to a point. And it can't be at the sacrifice of the other qualities that are needed to make that athlete great. There's no deadlift bar on home plate. There's no bench press rack on the pitching mound. So yeah, that's something that I've always had in the back of my head, but even personally within my own training, it's something that I've realized more and more. And I've started how I train personally and then how I train our athletes too. I've definitely shifted more to an athletic development looking base of speed development, acceleration, being able to move in all three planes, being very dynamic and athletic.
Yeah, to that last point, I would feel 100% the same way. And I think the last time you and I did an interview, which was years and years and years ago, ourselves from then would think very differently than ourselves from now, right? Like,
yeah.
I very specifically remember you lifting a ton of weight. I very specifically remember me lifting a ton of weight, right? And now that I've gotten a little bit older, I've gotten into rock climbing, I've gotten into some different things, I realized that I have a really good strength base. I don't need to tap into it all the time. And I certainly don't need to tap into that at the expense of the other things that I'm trying to do with my life. And as long as I stay within a certain bandwidth and I'm kind of smart about how I progress my regular strength work, right? My deadlifts, my chin-ups, my bench, my squat, I'm not going to get hurt. I'm still going to keep those qualities relatively high, and I can train other things in the meantime. And it's funny because I've been posting a lot more frequently since I got out of baseball, and everybody's like, oh, you're just doing a ton of mobility. You're just doing a ton of accessory stuff. And I'm like, no, I'm still doing the regular training. It's just not the only thing I'm doing anymore. Right. And I equate it to like, if you can easily keep adding weight, keep doing it. But once you start tapping into like these adaptive resources to just put on 5 or 10 extra pounds on something, it's not worth it anymore. And like you said, there's no deadlift bar at home plate. If there was, you and I would be professional baseball players, not the guys that are playing baseball. You know what I mean? And I think there's kind of this interesting thing, and I'm curious now that you're out of it and you're training athletes from other sports. In the baseball world, it feels like younger and younger kids are doing baseball specific workouts, and they're not doing general strength training. So a lot of those kids actually probably need it moving up, where some other sports, it doesn't necessarily feel the same way. Like, I'm starting to work with some other sports in the facility I'm at now, and I don't see the same, like, all right, this is a 10-year-old football player. Like, he needs these specific football drills. It's just like, hey, get strong because football players are strong. And then as they get older, they have a better base of training. So I'm curious if you're seeing the same thing in your facility, or if it's kind of just an all-encompassing, like, yeah, kids are getting too sports specific too early.
Yeah, the early sports specialization nationwide is getting kind of out of hand, to say the least. Even talking with peers from other parts of the country, it's kind of alarming. The amount of, a lot of us strength coaches, we think about Bondarchuk's pyramid of development, and the base of that pyramid being like our movement capacities and general preparatory work. And we get a little bit more specialized as we work up. And then the top of the pyramid, which is the smallest portion, is the competition in the event. And there's no doubt, like, you and I both coming from the professional baseball world, the amount of work that needs to be done at that specific scale of swinging a bat is high. Like, it's a reality. But by the time, you think about like a 16 or 18-year-old kid that starts in the minors, or even a college kid that starts in the minors, and the amount of years it takes them to get up to the big leagues, the amount of general and close preparatory work that they do that's more, strength based, normal ranges of motion through very, common general movements of, hinge, squat, push, pull, those types of things. The pyramid that they build, that base is so robust by the time that you get to the top. And it's also one of those too, where it's like the top is what you see on television, but I think what we see in sports, especially youth sports, is that all those kids see is television, and they don't see what a pro baseball day looks like. They don't see that, hey, they get to the field, at noon or 11, and the first thing they do is they go to the training room, or they go to the weight room, and they're going through a pre-activation mobility routine. And they have different moments throughout the day where they're hitting dynamic warm-ups, and they're lifting twice a week. Some guys, I had guys that lifted 4 days a week in season. Obviously those sessions looked a little bit different, but with very, basic movements. And yeah, the specialization piece is what people are seeing. So then I think that's what they jump on. Oh, well, this is what they're doing. And also, I don't think that a lot of our broadcasting networks help, because they're looking for, if they're going to give you behind the scenes, it's always something gimmicky and guru-y. There are good tools out there, like the aqua bags, the water bag training stuff. Those are all good tools that can help, but that shouldn't be the foundational base of your training. But that's all they're seeing. Well, this is what the strength coach said that they're doing with the Angels or whoever. However, that's not the whole picture. So yeah, it's pretty amazing too. I was actually, I was talking with one of our assistant coaches the other day about how I feel like I'm lifting as much as I lifted when I was in pro ball at my strongest. I just do it way less, way less.
Same,
and I
dude.
feel
Totally
so
same.
much better. I feel
Correct.
yeah. And I can move better. I'm faster now than I was. I PR'd my vertical 2 months ago. Lifetime PR. I'm 32 years old. And I want to keep chasing that as long as I can. I think the quicker I can move longer, I think the healthier my joints and my tendons, my ligaments are all going to be. But yeah, that's kind of devolving. The sports specificity that's a constant conversation. It doesn't matter where you are. And that's really what we try to, send that message home of like, look, your kid's already getting a lot of this top pyramid stuff. We need to build the base. And as you build the base, you'll be surprised at how much better this naturally becomes, because they're already doing it.
Yeah, that's, like I said, at least within the baseball world, that's what I've started to see. I haven't been outside. I've only been outside of it for a little over a year now, so I haven't seen a ton of it. The facility I'm at specifically, I think we do a great job of kind of addressing that as a whole. But obviously there's a million facilities all over the country that, like you said, people see, hey, this is what's on TV or what's on Instagram or what's on, whatever. Let's just do that. And there's not necessarily a rhyme or reason to implementing it. And it's not, maybe it's hurting kids' development or holding them back, or I don't know, but it just seems like some of that general bottom of the pyramid stuff you're talking about is missing with a lot of kids nowadays. And to be fair, maybe that's what helps separate you and brings people in, and they're like, oh, this guy knows what he's talking about. And it's like, no, we're just doing good, solid strength training, acceleration training, mobility training, all of that stuff. And we're just doing it appropriately. We're doing it consistently. And, we're basically tailoring it to what you need. And maybe that's what makes you stand out, right? Like doing the basic stuff really, really well, doing the non-sexy stuff really, really well helps you to separate. And then the fact of the matter is that I would think, right, how to sprinkle that sexy stuff in when the time is right, to kind of give them maybe what they want, and then you're addressing mostly what they need most of the time. That's how I would envision it, like being able to help stand out in a world of people running their own businesses and everything like that. But I'm also not running my own business, so I don't want to put words in your mouth. You know what I mean?
I think you hit the nail right on the head. A lot of what we do is, being brilliant at the basics, giving them capacity to be able to put more force in the ground. A lot of our work is, we assess every kid that comes in individually. We do a movement assessment. So if they do, one of the questions I'll always ask at the start is like, what do you hope to get out of this, for your sport? Because a lot of times when they come in, that's what they're thinking. Like, how do I get started here? Where's the best place to improve my swing, make me hit the ball further. Okay, cool, great. There's a lot of reasons why you might not be hitting the ball further. It might not be me. That can help you. So let's kind of pick that apart. But when we start to look at movement, joint by joint, ranges of motion, how they go through global movements, once we start to understand that, then we can see, okay, is this movement deficiency? Are we leaking energy somewhere? Is it a strength issue? And more often than not, like the kid can get stronger a lot of the times, especially if we're dealing with, youth, middle school and high school athletes, a lot of the time early on, that is, definitely going to help. But yeah, finding small ways to help them see that transfer, helping them to realize, even if it's something as simple as like, hey, when you go to throw the baseball, when you're pitching, you need to be able to rotate over your front hip. That's hip internal rotation. Okay. What capacity do you have for that? Okay. So then when they do their hip mobility work, they're like, oh, this is sports specific, even though I have a lot of people that I'm doing hip internal rotation work for every sport, it's being able to wrap it in a way that is well received, and they know that, hey, there is some direct application that's going to help me. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, that makes total sense. Well, let's get into the business side of things then. And specifically, I think we can start just like, what does day-to-day life look like for you now? And then maybe compared to baseball, and then we can just kind of go from there if you're cool with that.
Yeah. So currently we're in school, school year time. So we kind of have that like before school, after school model for the most part. We have some sessions we run before school. That's primarily our high school athletes that can drive. We actually don't let any youth or middle school athletes come at that time because we want them to sleep and grow and do all the things that they're supposed to do at that age. And then we have an after school, 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m. window where the rest of our youth and high school athletes come. The middle of the day seasonally is very up in the air. Currently, I have an NFL player that's at OTAs, but he's in periodically throughout the off season. And then in the fall and winter, we have our pro baseball players that are back in town. So depending on the time of year, it's a little bit busier than others with that. And then also seasonally, we'll have our college athletes that are back for winter break. In the summer, we're front day heavy. We try to get the ball rolling about 7 a.m. and we'll coach pretty much through the morning. And then we'll have like an hour off, and then we'll start again at like 12:30 and then finish early afternoon. That's kind of the hour adjustments. We try to keep our groups as small as we can. I cap our group sizes right now at 12 athletes per group. We always have at least 2 coaches on the floor. Right now we have 3 for the most part, which allows us to kind of, honestly, like when I set this up, I was like, I want to run this like pro ball. Like I never had more than 4 guys in the room at a time, probably sometimes maybe 6, but like 4 guys maybe training at the most. And a lot of times it was like 1 or 2. So that allows you to be really individualized. And yeah, I just liked how it was like, I think all the details matter. And if you can execute the basics really, really well, and those athletes know it in their bones, like this is how I hinge, this is how I squat, this is what a lunge is supposed to look like, this is how my shoulder's supposed to move when I'm doing these extra, like if they know it in their bones, then they start to take responsibility for their own career. And I know you and I have probably both said that 1,000 times with baseball guys, of like, you need to take responsibility of your body because your body is your most important asset. So you need to take responsibility for your body, for your career. So we have a lot of athletes that are pretty self-sufficient. We are definitely on the hand holding side of things early on to make sure they understand what expectations are. And that allows us to be able to kind of float throughout the room. We try to be as on hands as possible, or hands-on as possible, but sometimes you have one kid that needs more attention. Well, if I did my job, if I have to turn my back on this other kid, that's okay because I've had him for a year. He knows exactly what he's supposed to do. Now I'm always, making the rounds, but that's kind of how we've developed it. Honestly, it feels a lot like pro ball in a lot of ways. Obviously we're not playing every day. There are the differences too. I'm not speaking in Spanish half the time. But yeah, it's incredibly similar.
How about on the weekends? Are you guys open and training people as well, or are you taking the weekends off?
Yeah, so we're open Saturday mornings. During the summer, we are off on the weekend. And then we're never open Sunday. We're the Chick-fil-A of training facilities, not open on Sunday. And then, yeah, we try to be done by like 11:30 on Saturday. So it's nice to have that kind of window to be able to, you know, be a person and spend some time with family, get things done around the house, all other really important things. So
Yes, it's life changing for sure.
yeah.
So you mentioned you're trying to be similar to pro ball. It feels similar, but how about the approach to training athletes specifically? How does that differ now that you're running your own business versus working with athletes in professional baseball? Or maybe it doesn't. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference is like in pro ball, everything's in house. Like if I want to go talk to the hitting coach, he's right there. If I want to go talk to one of my athletes hitting coaches now, he's across town. So that's different. The importance of communication is, I mean, communication is always important, but there is a little bit more legwork on my end with that. If we do have things that we need to work on, we've really tried to build good relationships with the coaches of our athletes as best we can. Not just the school coaches or their travel ball coaches, but also pitching instructors, hitting instructors. And then also with that parents. If I was to make a pro ball analogy, sometimes parents feel like the player development director or the front office in terms of wanting to know what's going on with their kids. In some ways that can sound terrifying because in baseball you have one front office, but if you're training 80 kids, you have 160 people in the front office, but it's not crazy. I think we do a really good job on the front end of trying to lay out what our goal of long-term athletic development is with the initial movement assessment when they come in. So we really try to lay it out like, this is the expectation. I'm not worried about Johnny peaking when he's 11 years old. I really want to see Johnny be as healthy as possible all the way through puberty, because the only thing he's going to take with him through puberty is his injury history. And coming out the other side with a great foundation and capacity of robust strength and resiliency to be able to go execute his skill on the field, give him the best chance at doing whatever he wants to do next in life. If that's playing at the next level, great. If not, then he can be a healthy individual for the rest of his life. So that we try to have that conversation as early as we can. And I think that really kind of sets the tone for how things are going to go. I also think one of the things that pro baseball helped me with tremendously was dealing with a lot of Latin Americans who don't speak a lot of English in just my communication in general. Being able to, I think Einstein says, if you can't, explain it to a sixth grader or a 6-year-old, then you don't understand it well enough yourself. So being able to, make the complex very simple for people to understand what we're trying to accomplish. So that way, whenever we go to have follow-up conversations, I don't feel like I need to catch them up to speed. They understand our expectations already, and I can have a very plain conversation about kind of where a kid's at in his improvement and maybe think adjustments that we need to make. Another conversation I think we had a lot in pro ball was like, this player needs to gain weight. This player needs to be faster. It's like, okay, if that's the conversation you want to have, food in, food out, you're the parent, you need to help me with that. So we really do try to kind of like in pro ball, how everything was in-house. We all kind of have our hands on the player and we're all trying to help from all directions. That's really what we try to do too. We understand our role and our piece in the puzzle, but we always want to err on our side of communication and making sure that everyone else understands, kind of like, hey, if this is the lowest hanging fruit of what we're trying to improve right now, this is how we fit into that. If you're the hitting instructor, if you're the parent, like, how are you having follow-up conversations to encourage that improvement as well?
All right, everybody, that's going to conclude part 1 of this 3-part interview with Ben. Our whole conversation is really long, very detailed. We go into a lot of things, and for me, it's just really nice to talk to somebody else who's also gotten out of the game and kind of found their own little niche and their own thing that they're being successful at and they're really enjoying. So in part 1 in this episode, we really discussed, competition and comparison. We just briefly got into his business, and the subsequent parts that are coming up, we're going to get much more in depth on his business and kind of some steps that if there are other coaches listening that are interested, I think that you'll find valuable. So 3 things that I took from Ben in this part of the interview: for younger athletes, building a solid foundation and giving them the capacity to put more force into the ground will go a long way. Smaller group sizes will allow for more individualized focus and attention, and making the complex simple enough for others to understand will help tremendously with buy-in from athletes. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll talk to you again on the next one.